right? Anyway, so again, welcome to our meeting. And I just wanted to start with a couple of general announcements. First of all, I think everybody saw this, or well, I don't know if people see the announcements, but anyway, so these accounting practice sessions, I was emailed by Emily Lau, who is a TA for Brother Sadoff. And Brother Sadoff is like he's the department chair for the accounting department at the main BYU Idaho campus. Anyway, she apparently is a student who is capable at accounting. I don't know anything about her, so I can't make an endorsement per se, but she's going to be holding sessions that anybody is invited to. So again, I put that in the announcements, but in case you missed that, here's her email address if you want to ask her questions, her phone number, the Zoom ID of where she's going to hold these sessions, and then the times. Again, those are totally open. That's Idaho time, so Mountain Daylight Time. The other thing I wanted to mention in the announcements, or just in general announcements, again, these are things that are in these announcements. Sometimes the announcement is so long, people miss things. Anyway, so like I mentioned before, there is this additional study content, which has additional things I put together that some people find helpful, and I just want to make sure people know about it. So that's there. What people like the most are the self-tests and the additional self-tests. Here's another little chart for asset liquidity order. I had a couple questions about that this week. So that's there. It's also in the textbook, but sometimes people find the textbook hard to use. There's usually me doing little videos of working out problems similar to the ones in the homework. So that's all there. And then when you get down to some of the exams, I'll do exam reviews, which is really, it's me reading through that exam checklist and explaining things a little bit. Again, some people are like, I just read through the checklist myself and that's good. Others say it's helpful. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that's there. And then finally, everybody who signed up for a presentation time, I've summarized your presentation time on a little Google Doc, and there should be a link to it starting in the week 4 announcements. So actually, week 4 announcement won't come out until Monday. I'm sorry, until Friday. But I'll show you what I mean. Right here, where it talks about the homework support presentation, there's a little reminder of which lesson you signed up for. So if you forgot to write it down, that'll be in the announcements each week. And again, recognize I teach 2 sections, so you'd have to find your section and then find your name, and that'll tell you which presentation you're signed up for. And then one other thing that seems to confuse people that I wanted to throw out there in the general announcements is these problems that you'll be doing your presentations on, they are homework problems. So you don't have to go into the book and find a different problem. These are problems in the homework set. So you'll actually be doing one of the homework problems for your classmates. And what I don't like about the way this is set up is the way it'll say exercise 3-5 in the homework set, but here we have it labeled as chapter 3, exercise 5, and that confuses people sometimes. So if you were assigned this week or next week's, and you were assigned exercise 3-5, it would be the same as, you were assigned chapter 3, exercise 5, that would be the same as the problem exercise 3-5 in the homework. Sometimes people are trying to find other problems in the books or things like that, and it's straight from the homework. Okay, so there's my general announcements. So before I move into more topic-specific stuff, any questions about these general announcements or questions about other things in the class, generally speaking, that I could answer? Apparently, we're good. All right. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this week's content. Um, the biggest, let's see, I'll just bring this up. And really, so in this chapter, we're learning about classified financial statements. And you learned about financial statements in chapter 1, and then classified financial statements is just another way of saying financial statements um, with extra detail, I guess would be a good way of putting it. So instead of just assets, now we're going to break that down into current assets and then non-current or long-term assets. Instead of just liabilities, we'll break that down into current and long-term liabilities, etc. So that's really all. Uh, so, so I guess I just wanted to sort of point out the parts of a classified balance sheet, and then we can get to any questions you have about the homework problems. Um, so current assets are assets that are are relatively liquid, and by liquid I mean easily convertible into cash. They're listed in liquidity order. Someone asked me the other day why debt investments or investments at all are listed before accounts receivable. And my answer is that if I have investments, like say stock or a debt investment, like a loan to somebody else, any market traded investment can be converted into cash nearly immediately, usually within about 3 days. So like, for example, today I sold some stock in my stock account and I'll get cash on that within 72 hours. Whereas an account receivable is money owed to me by my customers. And so that can take time to collect. If I have a feeling I'm owed about, I have about, personally in my business right now, I have $6,000 or $7,000 in accounts receivable, money that's owed to me by customers. And if I really wanted to collect on that and push people hard, I'd say it would take me, probably 30 days to collect half of it and another 60 to 90 days to get all of it. And some I wouldn't even be able to collect. So that's why accounts receivable is typically listed after investments. Anyway, so that's what current assets are. It's assets that are cash or can be converted into cash within the next year or so, within the next operating cycle of the business or a year. Long-term assets or non-current assets include long-term investments, things like stock that we can't sell for some reason or that we have no intention of selling, real estate, things like that. Property, plant, and equipment, those are all the things that we're using for running our business. So my business is a self-storage business. My property, plant, and equipment would be the land that my buildings are on, my buildings, and the equipment. Let's say I have a tractor for keeping the property nice. That would be my property, plant, and equipment. And then finally, intangible assets. Those are assets that are not tangible. And by tangible, we mean like things you can touch, right? I can go out and touch a building, I can touch the land, but I can't touch a patent other than, I guess, holding the paper it's written on. A patent just means that I have the exclusive rights to an idea. That's an intangible asset. Copyrights, trademarks, things like that are all intangible assets. Whoops. And then the liabilities and stockholder equity section, again, broken into current liabilities. Those are amounts that we are going to have to pay cash on within the next year, and long-term liabilities, things that we won't have to pay for longer than a year. I think we learned in this chapter that there can be a current and a non-current portion on our liability. Like our mortgage, for example, there's a portion of it that we have to pay within the next year, but a portion of it that's due more than a year out. Um, so that's current and non-current liabilities. The most common current liabilities you'll see are notes payable, accounts payable, and the unearned revenue and things like that. So the ones they have listed on there, those are pretty common. And then finally, stockholders' equity. Again, stockholders' equity always includes at least these two things: the common stock, which is the amount of money that the owners have invested in the business, and the retained earnings, which means profits the business has made over the years and hasn't paid back out to the owners in the form of dividends. We'll learn about other things in the stockholders' equity section, but for now, that's really all there is. So that's really what this chapter is about, is just learning these more specific and more confusing forms of the balance sheets. So at this point, I would just turn the time over to you for any questions you might have about concepts, or um, or specific problems from the chapter.
I have a question on
Sure.
the classified balance sheet. Can you just show it, please? No, the first one.
Okay.
Yep. So I was confused where the 19,000 is coming from.
Okay, good. Yeah. So in our balance sheet here, in the property, plant, and equipment section, for all of our property, plant, and equipment other than land, we're going to list something called accumulated depreciation. And we'll learn more about depreciation as we go. But what depreciation is, it's a process by which we allocate the cost of long-term assets like equipment or buildings over their useful life. So for example, if I buy a building for my storage and it costs me $100,000, if I try to take that $100,000 as an expense all at once, it's really going to throw off my accounting, because in the first year I buy that building, it'll look like I lost a whole bunch of money, and then each year after that, when I'm using the building to make money, it'll look like I'm making a whole bunch of money, when really the cost of that building should be spread out over its life. So the process, which we'll learn more about later, that we do that by is called depreciation. So here, depreciation accumulates over time. So you'll see the way they list this is they put the value of the land all the way over here in the second column.
Yep.
And then the value of the equipment in this first column less the accumulated depreciation. So it's what you paid for the equipment minus any accumulated depreciation, and that's what's called the book value of the asset equipment. So that's where the 19,000 comes from. It's the 24,000 less the accumulated depreciation of 5,000.
Thanks.
Anybody have any, like I said, questions about some of these concepts, or even specific questions about homework problems? And if you don't, that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with a quick meeting.
I do have, and I'll turn my video on. I do have a questions, and that is in preparation for the exam. I want to make sure we can take it on Tuesday. Then it does not have to be done by Saturday.
Which exam?
Exam 1.
So that exam becomes available on Tuesday, right? Let's see.
I thought it had to be done by Tuesday, so it becomes available on Tuesday.
Let's see. Oh, you're right. Let me look. So whatever, let's see, in week 3, so it's due by May 12th. Yeah, next Tuesday. I'm sorry. So you can do that anytime between now and next Tuesday.
So I went, I opened the sheet as you showed us last week on the exam, the preparation for the exam, know what you need to know. And I started filling it, but there's one thing that I was not totally sure. And like I said, I'm not at that part yet, is the know about the 2 components of stockholders' equity, which that would be common stock and retained earnings.
Correct.
And 4 things increase and decrease these 2 components. I know there's dividends, but I couldn't, that would decrease, but I wasn't sure what the 4 things increase and decrease.
Sure. Yeah, I can address that. So your stockholders' equity, like you said, is your common stock and your retained earnings. Your common stock, of course, is increased by the owners putting money into the business. That's what increases common stock, and so that's really it. But retained earnings is if you think of the statement of retained earnings that we learned about last chapter, it is the beginning retained earnings plus net income minus dividends gives us our ending retained earnings. And then net income is a function, not a function, but it is our revenue minus expenses. So we would say our retained earnings is increased by revenues and decreased by expenses and decreased by dividends.
That's what I was missing then. I knew the net income and the dividends, but I couldn't figure out where the other items were. Okay.
Yeah. So capital stock is increased by owner investment in the business. Retained earnings is increased by revenues, decreased by expenses, decreased by dividends.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's one of these things that 6 weeks from now, you'll be like, oh, that's obvious. But when you're first learning it, there's all these little things to have to remember, and that's challenging. I always say it's like when someone tries to explain a game to you, like a board game or a card game, and you're like, I don't really, thanks for explaining that, but it's still confusing. And then you play a few rounds and you're like, oh, that wasn't as bad. I always tell people just work with it every day for 20 years and then it'll be easy. Like, this was hard for me when I was learning about it in school, but now that I work with it all the time, it becomes easier and easier.
Yeah, it's the way that they word, the questions, or like another one that I'm looking for is know the 2 fundamental qualities and 5 enhancing qualities of useful accounting information. I mean, it's just,
Yeah. And that stuff, to me, it's like, I look at that and I'm just like, I don't know that. Like I have to, I seriously, if I was going to take a test on that right now, I'd have to go back to the book, write it out a few times and make like a flashcard and memorize it, because I work with accounting stuff all the time. And like never once have I like looked at, one of my people I'm working with and be like, what are the enhancing qualities of, like, we don't talk that way. And so I don't know why. I've decided that textbook authors, rather than writing for students who don't know much about the topic and are learning, I think they decide that they're writing for other people who have like either doctorate degrees or experience in the field, like trying to impress them. And so they always leave the students kind of going like, well, why did you use that giant word? Why didn't you just, just list it out? So, those types of questions, what I try to do when I'm studying these things is I try to look at these questions and like that one you just listed, or this one right here, like know the following: economic entity assumption, going concern assumption, and so forth. I try to separate them out into like knowledge-based questions, like things I just have to read through and make sure I understand, versus I guess I'd call them, math-based questions, questions that I'm going to have to know how to work out some process or understand some mathematical relationship between things. That helps me sort of divide my studying, and then say these are just items I have to memorize, whereas these are things I have to understand the deeper relationship between the items so I can work it out.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. So I have 2 questions. One that is kind of not super important, I will say, because I was doing the homework and I saw on one of the examples, they have 2 on the balance sheet, because I have it right here with me, but I don't want to share my screen because I have a lot of stuff. So in a balance sheet, it have in the liabilities and stockholders' equity, and the current liabilities not payable, and also again has on long-term liabilities again not payable. So I was wondering how we can have the same one under the same name, and how we can know which is the difference between having one on not on current liability and also the same one on long-term liability. Make sense?
I didn't follow the question exactly.
I will share my screen with you and show you what I'm talking, because it's gonna be hard for me.
Okay,
and for you also to see what I'm talking about.
okay, let me make sure I'm set up here so that you can share screen.
Okay, good.
Let's see. All right, now you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, let me. Okay, share the screen. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Let's see. Let me make sure I have the right window open. All right, I see it.
Okay, can you see it's you know, you can see the balance sheet on orange? Or do you need, I can make it bigger.
Where are we looking at? I see a Wiley Plus window open. I see the exam review open.
Okay, this is what we are looking at.
There it is. Okay, now I see it.
Okay, because I'm doing a study guide.
Uh-huh.
So, and from my study guide, is quite a lot of stuff going on. So, I mean that the not payable is under current liability, but also it's hidden. And it's
Right.
like, maybe it's a mistake from the book and supposed to be another thing, but I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's not a mistake. Here's what happens is first of all, many businesses have more than one note payable, meaning they might owe money to the bank, they might owe money to another lender, they might owe money to a supplier. So they might have multiple, think about like in our personal finances, I owe money on my car, I owe money on my house. So I have multiple notes payable. Some notes payable, or even some portion of my notes payable, is due in less than a year. And so that would be part of my current liabilities, where some of my notes payable, say like my mortgage loan on my house, isn't due for 20 years. And so it's possible to have notes payable that are both current liabilities, or to have some notes payable that are current liabilities, and to have some notes payable that are long-term liabilities. It has to do with the due date on the note. So if I borrowed money from two different people and the one I owed within the next year, that would be a current liability. The other I owed 5 years from now, that would be a long-term liability.
Okay, and thank you. I have another question related to the exam.
Okay.
So now maybe I want to know more in deep, maybe on the paper that you share with us, that document that is an announcement. You already explained it, but I didn't have the chance to watch it. Can you tell me more about what we're supposed to know on here? It is more
Sure.
than just doing the stuff, or because
Yeah. So you're talking about the one you just highlighted?
Yes.
About net income and net loss. So all they really want you to do is recognize. So remember that net income just means that your revenue exceeds your expenses, right? You brought in more money than you paid out. And a net loss would be the opposite, where your expenses exceeded your revenue. So and that happens in any business. You have periods where you have a net loss. All they really are trying to get you to understand is that net income increases retained earnings, and a net loss would decrease retained earnings. That's all really.
Okay. Yeah, because I was looking for something in particular to put on my study guide, and it is too basic. So it's only that.
It's only chapter 2. It's supposed to be basic, right?
We have to do amazing, because this is gonna be the easiest exam, I believe.
I will say that exam 1 is usually like people score better on this one. Exam 2 is probably what I think one of the harder ones. So I'm not trying to get you nervous about exam 2. Focus on exam 1 right now.
So, and maybe this is gonna be helpful for my classmates, maybe not. So I didn't create, I went to the homework and I found there was a long list of accounts. I'm sorry, my first language is Spanish, and I know English, I know accounting in Spanish, so now I have to learn everything in English, and it's kind of complicated sometimes.
You're doing great, Brenda. I do not think I would do as well as you're doing if I were trying to study accounting in Spanish. So I think you're impressive.
I appreciate it. It's tough, but I'm doing my best collecting definitions. So I found this doing the homework, and I was wondering, because in my case, I have to memorize them. Not, it is gonna be tough to me just to remember by name so quickly and where they are. So I was thinking, okay, it is a picture you can see. Go in and put which one is maybe is gonna go to my balance sheet, which one is gonna be for my expenses. So it's because when I used to study accounting in my country, we always use the same accounts. And maybe this is gonna be kind of, something good to know. Okay, this is the accounts that we are using for the exam. Just learn it. Make sense?
Yeah. So first of all, you'll recognize that in the homework assignments, they really are using a limited number of accounts. Okay. In fact, what you have here is more in depth than what you would have seen in the homework, really. And so here's a couple things that will help, I think. First of all, there's some keywords that help me memorize these things. First of all, any account that has payable in it is a liability, always a liability, because that's money that's owed to somebody else. Okay, so that keyword payable will really help, because you can now say anything that has notes payable, accounts payable, those are always liabilities. Secondly, anything that has receivable in it is always an asset, because that's money that's owed to me. So accounts receivable, notes receivable, those are always assets. Thirdly, expenses always have expense in their name. So that helps. And then revenues always have revenue in their name. There's one confusing one that's called unearned revenue that confuses everybody, because it has revenue in its name, so people think it's a revenue account, but it's not really. Okay, unearned revenue is money that someone has paid me in advance of me providing services to them. And so unearned accounts, when you see unearned in front of it, those are actually liabilities as well. Okay, that's money that I received in advance, and now I owe the services, or I owe the money as a refund back to people. So if you just take those few things I said right there, if it has payable, it's a liability. If it has receivable, it's an asset. And then expenses have expense in their name, and revenue has revenue in their name. That handles a big chunk of this list. And then when I know that a balance sheet just has assets, liabilities, and equities, that's all that goes on a balance sheet. So revenue and expenses never go on the balance sheet. Assets, liabilities, equity, or stockholders' equity. And then the income statement has revenue and expenses. So by sort of categorizing them in that way, it really makes it easier for me to memorize things. And then there's things that are like buildings, which I think if you just think about what they are logically, they're clearly assets. It's something I own. And so in other words, I think what you can do is, if you can apply those rules, then there's only a handful of things to really truly have to memorize, and the rest you just learn how to categorize by rule.
Yeah, but
Does that help at all?
it's of course,
Okay.
of course, because I'm not good memorizing. Thank you. So
Okay,
I'm
good.
gonna stop sharing my screen.
You don't have that much stuff open, okay, by the way.
Well, actually, I have two screens.
Okay.
So and I have school one side and laptop one other side and work on the other side. A mess.
Okay. I understand. I have the same thing going on. Any other questions?
If no one else have question, I have more question, but I want to give the time to other ones.
Well, Brenda, it looks like the floor is yours. So if you have other things you want to say, there are other questions to
The
ask.
thing is, I'm working in my study guide, and I don't want to miss anything, and I think it's helpful for everyone. So let's give a look to what else I want to ask on my
And also I'll note to people, if you have other things going on, you know, you don't have to stay on here while I'm answering Brenda's questions, although I think some of her questions may be helpful to everybody. But also we're recording it, so if you know, I just want to kind of leave that open to you. You don't have to. This meeting is available for you, but at the same time, you don't have to stay if we ever hit a point where you're like, hey, I need to go.
How long is the meeting?
The meeting goes until we're done, until people don't have questions anymore. So usually it's between 30 minutes to an hour. We've had short ones that are only like 15 minutes. And occasionally they run long. It can't run long tonight because I have another meeting at 7 o'clock. But again, sometimes what happens is we'll kind of get through the general questions, and then people will say, I'm good, and they'll leave. And then people that have more specific questions will hang out and ask those. So, you know, there's nothing rude about saying I have other things that I need to do. So, but typically 30 to 45 minutes. I know what you're thinking. That was a really long answer to a really short question. Sorry.
Okay, well, when I was collecting all the information. You already mentioned about this, but anyways, I want to know why on the, you know, when you do the self-study on the book,
Uh-huh.
it mentions in different ways, and they put all together, and then they split it, and they mix it, and it bothers me a lot because it's like, what's going on? The assumptions, principles, and constraint, and they did an assignment, and they mentioned the violation of those. So my question is, in how we are going to be tested on those? We are going to have examples. How we apply them? Because I agree with you. It's not something that accounting is knowing all the time.
Right.
And if you like it, I have all the assignments, but I say it's assignment. I don't know if I should share, because I watched the video when the person was explaining one by one, and then I did the homework, and I said it doesn't make sense.
Right.
You switch.
So here's what I would say to that, Brenda. There's a reason that we've provided this little checklist to study by, because there is so much information. And then because different learners learn in different ways, they've tried to present the information in multiple ways, right? So some people really do well auditorily, so we put video and audio in there, and some people really like to break things down, and that's how their brain works. That I would say a danger that many students face when it comes to preparing for these exams is to try to learn such a broad base of information that they don't understand the information deeply enough. And so what I would do is I would go through whoever wrote this checklist. It wasn't me, okay, but whoever wrote this, they looked at the test questions and wrote each of these bullet points. In other words, each of these bullet points corresponds directly with a question on the exam. And so I would make this the centerpiece of my studying, and I would not, you know, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on things outside of this information right here.
Okay.
Because there's just too much. You could study for 20 hours and still feel like you didn't understand the breadth of everything. So narrow your studying down to these.
Yes, like for example, it says on this study guide, they don't have numbers, so I'm gonna read it. Now, know the 2 fundamental qualities and 5 engaging qualities of using account information. And I found only 4. So which is the 5th?
Again, I'd have to look in the book. That's not something I have memorized. Which one is it that you're looking at?
It is gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6. It's gonna be the 6th bullet. Oh,
Right there.
yeah.
So know the 2 fundamental qualities and 5 enhancing qualities of useful accounting information. So honestly, I would have to look in my book in chapter 2,
If I don't,
right? And I would just, I mean, I don't have a secret way to study, especially that informational type of stuff, because all you're really doing is saying,
on page
okay,
72, they have a table.
mm,
72 bottom, no
okay,
top.
72 in my book does not have a table, so it's probably, sometimes, do you, if you have the BYU version, it's got different page numbers.
I have this.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different. All right, so I'm on page 59 in mine. It says qualities of useful information, and then it has enhancing qualities. These include comparability, verifiability, timeliness, and understandability. That's only 4.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why they have 5 in the study guide, because there's also only 4 in my book.
Yes, I'm not turning crazy. I just
Yeah.
paying attention too much or overwhelming with this.
Well, and so, I mean, that's all you can do at that point, right? Is you can say, I can study what's in the book. I noted 4, and, you know, and all I can do as an instructor is say, well, I'll put in a fix to tell them that this is wrong because it has 5 qualities instead of 4. But I think it's, like I said, it's easy to get yourself, you know, I guess almost like obsessing about each one of these bullet points and trying to understand it so broadly that you miss the point. I will say that the way these exams are set up, people often miss questions because of the wording of the question, which I hate, but that's how they have it set up. So you have to read things carefully and make sure you understand what they're asking. A lot of times people will sort of read it really quickly and just pick an answer, and that gets them into trouble. Anyway, so on that specific bullet point, I'd say that's an error, and I'll email our course content people and ask them about that.
Other thing more about it is, because we are working on the chapter 2 list, so we have the ratios, and because it's all together in the book, so I want to know the earning per share. Dummy question. It is not a ratio, right? Doesn't count as a ratio.
What doesn't? Earnings per share?
Yes.
No, earnings per share is a ratio.
It's a ratio. Okay. Thank you. I put it on my list, but it doesn't say ratio, so it's a formula. So for the ratios, it's gonna be earning per shares will be to current ratio and debit to asset ratio, because they say ratios. So for it's gonna be the step 4, the bullet 4.
Well, and they want you to have them understand which of them is a profitability ratio, a solvency ratio, or a liquidity ratio, right? In other words, the purpose of the ratio.
Mm-hmm. What is here? Income. Okay. For my side, that's it. I just went through the.
Well, and if other questions come up as you're studying, you can always either you can post them to the little question area in the discussion board. I always prefer that. I check that about twice a day or so. So it's not a good place if you have like an emergency need or something, but what I like about posting them there is other students can respond, and also if I respond, everybody can see it and learn from it too. So if as you're studying, you have some other things come up, don't be afraid to post in there. And if you have something that you need a more immediate answer to, you can always text me as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it because I feel like I'm in the right path, and your help is really, it's really appreciated, at least for me. And all the clarifications, I feel good for this exam.
Well, good. Well, like I said, I have another meeting starting in about 15 minutes. So if there's no other questions from anyone else, I think we probably need to draw this one to a close.
I just want to ask you something, please.
Okay.
It's about the video that you gave to us last week, the speech. It was an extra credit.
Uh-huh.
So honestly, I really need that video. I don't know how I can get the link or maybe the transcript,
Sure. So you're
please.
talking, so if you go to the modules in the course,
Yeah.
I have one of these little extra credit things every other week. So down at the bottom of week 2, there's
Yeah.
this little discussion board called Spiritual Book of Life.
Yeah.
And if you click on that, here will be the place where you can listen to that little talk and then make a comment. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but what I'm asking is like, can I get a transcript? Is there a way for me to get a transcript of it? Or to get, so my purpose is I want to get access to it maybe after this class, or maybe after the
Sure.
semester.
I would guess, let me look real fast. I think you could just Google, because it's a
Oh,
It's got
BYU
it on the
speech.
BYU speeches.
Right, it's a
because
BYU speech. So if
I
you
tried, but
Google Spiritual Book of Life
It's called Our Book of Life.
or Our Book of
Okay.
Life,
Okay, I'll try again.
let's see. Yeah, it doesn't come up very easily with a Google search. There's too many Book of Life references out there. BYU.
I can post the link in chat.
Okay, or I was
Okay.
just gonna find it real quick and post it in here, but yeah, there it is. But yeah, it's in the BYU speeches, so I'll actually.
Okay.
Did you post it there already? Chat. Anyway, so thank you. I didn't see who said that. I was looking on the other screen.
Thanks.
But just in case, I posted it there too. So, and in fact, what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll edit this Spiritual Book of Life right here to also put the link in. So there's another place you'll be able to find it if you need to.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, whoever posted that or who said that. All right. So like I said, I think it's time to finish up this meeting. So can we get a closing prayer from someone?
I'd be happy to do it.
Great. Thanks, Emery.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for all the many blessings that thou hast given us. We're thankful for this time that we have had to get together and have our questions answered and learn from each other. We ask thee to please bless us, that we might have thy spirit to be with us as we study and prepare for our exam. And we ask thee that we may be able to commit what we're learning to memory, that we may be able to have thy help as we do study and as we do take the test. And these things we ask thee in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
remember, if you have questions, you don't have to wait till just this once a week. You could always ask me in the middle of the week too. So thanks again.